Thanks again for the presentation. Next on the agenda, Senior Director of Climate Policy and Planning, Kat Eschel, is here to present the decarbonization strategy. Welcome, Kat. Look forward to the presentation.
Thank you, and good afternoon at this point, Chair McGee, members of the board, Interim Secretary and General Manager Eng. My name is Kat Eschel. I'm Senior Director of Climate Policy and Planning, and I've been at the MBTA for just under 2 years. I report to Lindsay Heffernan, our Chief of Policy and Strategic Planning. Before being at joining the MBTA, I worked at the City of Boston for about 6 years in several different capacities, leading a lot of their planning and policy work on decarbonization, air quality, among other topics. So today, I'm going to be presenting on the MBTA's decarbonization strategy. And I'm talking about this really from that climate policy and planning perspective, but this work really does reflect leadership from across the authority. So really want to shout out the work of teams in bus modernization, transformation, infrastructure planning, capital delivery, operations, vehicle engineering, and many, many others. So for today, we're going to review the T's leadership role in reducing regional greenhouse gas emissions, our progress and the lessons that we've been learning, and strategies to move forward. Per last month's request during your board meeting, during the rail modernization update, I'm going to give a high-level overview of our overall emissions and our progress to date, but then I'm going to do a deeper dive really looking in at bus. I'm also going to share more about our plans going forward, including upcoming work to develop a decarbonization plan. So to start, the MBTA is a climate solution. Transportation is the state's largest source of greenhouse gas emissions, but the MBTA is a relatively small contributor. The transit system contributes just 1% of those statewide transportation emissions, but transit also carries 1 in 10 commuters in the region, and we serve many other types of trips beyond just commutes. Those trips would otherwise occur by car, and so that means that the T is providing significant emissions reductions for the region. This means that reliable service is in and of itself a climate strategy. And it's also worth noting that as we grow our service, that might also mean that the T's direct emissions may also increase. In parallel, we still have many opportunities to reduce our own emissions. So we've already cut our direct emissions by more than 25% in less than 20 years. We've cut our net emissions, which means that we've taken into account our renewable energy purchases, and we've cut those emissions by more than 40%. So we're well ahead of state emission targets. This work obviously has broader benefits beyond our climate goals. Our work to improve the service boosts reliability, it makes our service cleaner, and it just makes the T a better neighbor for the communities that we serve. To do that, we've been following best practices to monitor our energy and emissions, implement energy efficiency, electrification, and fuel switching projects, and in recent years, as I noted, we've been purchasing renewable energy credits to cover our electricity use. So what remains and what levers are available to us? Most of our emissions come from rolling stock. That's the diesel, the natural gas, and the gasoline that powers regional rail, buses, ferries, paratransit, and our non-revenue vehicles. Regional rail represents 43% of our emissions, and that's from the ultra-low sulfur diesel that we're burning in our locomotives. Bus is about 18%, and then the remaining modes are each small contributors, up to 3 to 4% each. A quarter of our emissions comes from electricity, and that powers both our subway and our facilities. And that's an amount that will grow as we electrify more of the rolling stock. There's some additional emissions that come from gas and steam that we use in our facilities. And then across all of these sources, we have levers. Those levers include efficiency, electrification, fuel switching, and when we think about the regional scale, improving and growing our service. Because each technology is different, our decarbonization approach necessarily varies by mode. For electricity, very quickly, we purchase renewable energy credits and are evaluating our strategy. We spent a long time talking about regional rail at the last presentation. We also discussed it during the SHE subcommittee meeting last week. And then there are smaller sources that are each about 3 to 4%, 3% of our emissions, as I noted. And for those, studies are either underway or they're complete. The challenges there vary, and we do have electrification opportunities, but they really do differ by mode. So since regional rail was covered last month and last week as well, today I'm really going to focus in on bus, since that was the request during the last board meeting in February. I'll note again that while bus is 18% of our emissions, it's about 40% of our ridership. Bus is big. So earlier I noted those best practices for decarbonization. So those are the levers that we can pull on and that we are pulling on for decarbonization in our strategy on bus. So that's service and reliability, efficiency, electrification, and fuel switching. So on service and reliability, we advance service through bus network redesign and reliability projects like installing rapid bus lanes and transit priority projects. These are the initiatives that help grow our ridership, and that's really the T's key role in advancing the Commonwealth's climate goals. On efficiency, we strengthen that by reducing how much fuel we're using in the buses through things like adopting hybrid bus technology. On the far right, fuel switching, you'll see there, is another tool. So we've already piloted renewable diesel from a logistical standpoint in the regional rail setting, so we're looking at opportunities to scale that use. And we're also piloting operating hybrid buses in battery mode, which they can do for short distances. We've been piloting that on the Silver Line Tunnel, and we're evaluating there as well where there might be opportunities to scale that, how we use that technology. I know that today there's particularly interest in electrification, and so in that space, we're adopting battery electric buses, BEBs, but we can only deploy as many BEBs as our chargers in our facilities can support. So we've been pursuing what's called depot charging, where you're charging at a central facility, and that's very similar to our current bus operations. There's also en route charging, and that's the space where we're really leaning into learning from our peers about their en route charging experiences. Electrification is notably where there's a legislative target that was set for the MBTA. The goal is ambitious, and it requires that all passenger buses after 2030 be zero emission for every new bus that we purchase. We must purchase a zero emission bus. And then the fleet as a whole must reach 100% zero emission by 2040. Bus modernization as a whole is more broadly part of the state's climate plans. The Commonwealth sets science-based economy-wide targets through the Clean Energy and Climate Plan. That's the CECP. The latest CECP, released in 2022, includes MBTA initiatives to leverage bus service as a climate solution. And so it includes things like bus network redesign and bus modernization. The Executive Office of Energy and Environmental Affairs, EEA, is currently starting the process to develop their next 5-year plan, and we're participating in that effort. That electrification mandate is really informing our strategy. 5 years ago, the MBTA launched the Better Bus Project to position our facilities and our fleet to meet a growing ridership. And so after the 2022 law was passed and established that zero-emission bus mandate, we adapted. So we released the Bus Electrification Plan in 2022, and that was working to lay out what fleet electrification by 2040 requires. And it meant electrifying faster than the rest of the Commonwealth and delivering new facilities every 2 to 3 years. At the time, it's worth noting, many of our peer agencies were heading in this direction as well. MTA, SEPTA, WMATA, LA Metro, CAP Metro, and many others were making similar commitments at the time. Converting to battery electric bus technology is part of a broader set of modernization initiatives that we've undertaken in recent years. So we've already made a switch to ultra-low sulfur diesel, which helps reduce air pollution from buses. The vehicles themselves have also gotten cleaner as emission standards have tightened over time. For example, on the right-hand side, you can see the chart for nitrogen oxide as emission standards, and that's where you can see that there are major reductions from those emissions from heavy-duty vehicles, which is the line in green there. Retiring our remaining 2008 diesel buses is going to yield further reductions because those come before some of the most recent standards. BEBs are continuing this trajectory of modernization, especially as battery technology advances. So similar to how we adopted hybrid buses, this is part of a next wave. And hybrid buses themselves also really improved our fuel economy and delivered carbon emission reductions as well. It is worth noting that BEBs eliminate tailpipe pollution, but they're not zero pollution because they are heavy vehicles, and so they may emit more particulate matter from tire and brake wear. With all of these changes, as we're modernizing our bus technology, the vehicle frames have evolved toward more overhead maintenance needs. And this is something that's particularly challenging in older garages that have limited vertical clearance. That's because our bus facilities were broadly built for the streetcar and the diesel bus era. They were also built for a workforce that looked very different. Some of our modern buses can't even clear the garage doors. And so transitioning to a modern fleet requires new facilities. And that's why it's critical to underscore time and again that this is an integrated fleet and facility strategy. So, how much progress have we made? 5 years in, it's exciting. We're on the cusp of some really major progress. North Cambridge is planned to open this summer with 32 BEBs going into operation. Quincy will operate 88 buses, BEBs, in 2027. Arbor Way is at 15% design, and we've acquired a site in Medford for a future facility after Arbor Way. Our current fleet, as you can see on the right, is mostly hybrids. That's a piece of the pie chart that's in light green. And then there's overhauled CNG buses in light blue, and roughly 150 diesels in dark green that we're looking to retire. By 2027, with all 120 of the BEBs that are on order delivered, the fleet mix will look very different than this chart shows today. The 2022 climate law also included a request for annual updates in the MBTA CIP on progress toward meeting the requirements to shift towards zero-emission buses. The statutory language is here on this slide. And you'll see that this includes documenting barriers and identifying strategies to overcome them. So we're here today with a very important and very exciting progress update. The FY27 to 31 CIP, which the general manager noted earlier, will fully fund the Arbor Way facility. Arbor Way will open BEB ready with a mix of BEBs and hybrid buses on day one of completion. We're then going to phase in additional BEBs as the market can reliably support them and deliver vehicles that meet our service needs. This is a long-awaited project, and it's being made possible through state support from the Fair Share investment in the Commonwealth Transportation Fund. We also want to recognize that facility delivery has been slower than what we laid out in our 2022 plan. We can only purchase and deploy BEBs if we have the facilities that are equipped to store, charge, and maintain them. So this challenge affects our ability to meet the original schedule. Given this, we are continuously assessing our path forward. We're incorporating lessons from the first 5 years of implementation and what we're hearing from peer agencies. We're also learning and sort of reacting to the implications of shifting federal funding, as well as changes in the manufacturing market. And all of this is with a focus on what we're doing and what we can do to improve bus service for the region. So as we take stock, we want to celebrate the success that we are seeing. On Tuesday, we announced that spring service will put bus service beyond pre-pandemic levels. We're also seeing results from bus network redesign with a 20% year-over-year ridership increase on the Phase 1 routes and deployment of new high-frequency service. We're making steady progress in modernizing our facilities, and we're moving forward investments in both the reliability of our existing fleets and new BEB technology. We've also secured federal support for our fleet modernization efforts, and state support is, of course, now enabling today's announcement for Arbor Way. We also need to be clear about the challenges in the current market and with today's technology. The BEB market cannot meet national demand. Buy America provisions limit our use of federal funds to solely North American manufacturers. But today, only 2 North American manufacturers remain. LA Metro was once targeting 100% BEBs for the Olympics, but they now expect to reach only 50%, with electric school buses closing the gap. Our industry has recognized that this is a challenge. APTA has been advocating, and the GM attended a Biden-era White House roundtable on addressing bus manufacturing and supply challenges. The costs are also substantial. In a tight funding market, these facilities have been challenging to deliver at the speed that we initially anticipated. As we design new facilities, we're finding that electrification is adding a 15 to 20% cost increment to the project costs. And so instead of delivering a facility every 2 to 3 years, we're trending toward 3 to 4. Our plan has generally been to modernize our network one facility at a time and by minimizing facility closures so that we're ensuring that service is preserved across our network as we implement this transition. What we're looking to avoid is a scenario where we avoid facilities, where we close facilities simultaneously in such a way that could potentially disrupt service. Bus prices have also risen by about 42% from inflation, and that's before you factor in the impacts of tariffs. And then recent federal funding rounds have also explicitly shifted away from BEBs to hybrids. And we have been successful in securing federal dollars to continue to replace diesel buses with hybrids. You'll hear a lot more about the broader impacts on capital during the CIP presentation coming up after me. Going back. Writ large, we're adopting new technology that comes with bumps in the road and growing pains. The power requirements and utility upgrades are significant, and we don't yet know the full budget impact of charging on the operational budget and what those electricity costs are going to look like. So operating the first 32 BEBs out of North Cambridge is going to give us some really important data. We've also had to focus very closely on fire and life safety requirements, and we're just continuing to navigate the industry's challenges as they are also adopting new technology. That includes recalls of batteries that are impacting the supply chain. We have not been impacted, but other agencies have, and that constrains how many buses are available on the market. The operational changes are also going to be something that we need to work through. The BEBs have performed reasonably well this winter, and that's in large part thanks to using auxiliary diesel heaters. And this is consistent with what peer agencies are doing in climates like Toronto and Montreal, so that we're preserving as much of the charge to actually run the service and not simply heat the vehicle. So broadly, as these facilities open and we continue moving these BEBs into service, there's just going to be strong change management that needs to happen on an ongoing basis. Finally, peer agencies are experiencing similar issues. Many have reported reliability and range challenges. Many are also shifting to mixed fleets, revising their electrification timelines, reinvesting in hybrids, and in some cases even returning to diesel buses. Last month, Chair McGee, some members of the executive team, and myself visited Montreal's operations, and we really wanted to learn from their experience with bus electrification. And what we heard there was officials describing really very similar constraints. And in their case, the provincial government was actually considering delaying their electrification targets and had already restored hybrid bus subsidies. So despite these challenges, we are continuing to move forward our global bus modernization initiatives. So it is critical, above all, that the MBTA ensure that bus service remains reliable, safe, and frequent, so that transit remains viable for those that need it, and to really make bus travel the preferred mode of choice in the region. After all, our ultimate goal is to provide high-quality service that supports mode shift and helps get people out of cars. We will advance the BEB procurements that have been previously authorized by this board, and we're also going to return with designs for Arborway and future hybrid bus procurements, which, as I noted, are being supported with a recent $79 million federal grant from the DOT's Low-No Grant program, one of the largest that was awarded in the country this past funding round. Importantly, we will also be working on a comprehensive decarbonization plan for the authority, documenting the regional benefits of transit usage. So this plan will quantify the climate benefits of MBTA service. Again, it's important to focus on the regional impact of transit service and usage versus single occupancy cars. We will also clarify our decarbonization levers and when and how we should go about using them based on the market, the shifting federal context, and other constraints. We'll analyze the pathways to reduce the MBTA's emissions, and that's going to include next steps for bus electrification as required by statute. Our goal is to complete this study within the next year. So in closing, decarbonization requires balancing between excellent and improving our service, so excellent service and growing that service, growing that ridership with smart and achievable emissions reductions. This is a space where the technology and the market is shifting rapidly. And so we're just going to continue to monitor, pilot, and implement solutions that support both our climate and our service goals. And we're happy to come back and make regular reports to the board. Thank you. I'm ready for any questions that you might have.
Thank you, Kat. Questions from board members?
I actually just have one, unfortunately.
Director Smart, then Director Skelton.
Thank you for your presentation. Quick question for you. When is typically this information available for the public to review?
So per the statute, it's going to be included in the 5-year CIP report that gets published sort of once, so it will be included in the 5-year CIP report.
No, for this week's, your presentation today, when was it posted? Because I don't think that the public got a chance to see this presentation before.
I believe that we were holding it because of the announcement of Arbor Way and the release of the FY 2731 CIP. So it should be posted online, but we can go back and double check and make sure that it's posted.
I appreciate it. Thank you very much.
Of course. Thank you, Director.
So just want to commend the MBTA for continuing to focus on buses. Anytime you're moving 40% of your ridership, you have got to actually pay attention to this mode. So I applaud all your efforts. I have a couple questions. Did the MBTA meet its 2025 goals? Are they on track to meet its 2030 goals? And are you going to hit the 2050 targets?
So as I note, so those targets, those are the transportation subsector targets. So it's across the entirety of the transportation sector, and doesn't actually have a goal for the MBTA specifically. So that's actually something that we're really excited to look at in partnership with other parts of state government, notably the Executive Office of Energy and Environmental Affairs, as well as the Governor's Office of Climate Innovation and Resilience. So it is a subsector-wide target. That being said, I will sort of note that we did achieve the 2025 subsector target ahead of schedule. And when you take renewable energy purchases into account, we could be on track to meet the 2030 subsector target. I think that's a strategy that we're looking at and want to continue to have some conversations with the board as well as with other parts of the team around seeing if that is still the right place where we want to put our limited dollars.
So the MBTA is that 1% of the entire target. Did I get that
We
right?
are 1% of that target, yes.
Okay, okay.
For the subsector.
And can you, I love that you're going to actually fund Arbor Way. Have you done the citizen engagement process around that? I know that that's, you're going to fund it, but what's the plan to engage the local community, particularly in terms of traffic mitigation, emissions from the diesel fuel and other things that will likely be concerns?
Thank you for the question. So there was a fair bit of community engagement that was happening in the lead up to the development of a 15% design. And so as we develop the sort of 100% design and start figuring out what that process is going to look like, I think there's going to be additional, at least one additional public meeting. I wouldn't be surprised if there's more than that.
Great, thank you. Thanks for the great work.
Thank you.
Director Katusian.
Kat, we were in these same places, but was it a week ago or was it 2 weeks ago now?
I think last week.
Was it last week? Yeah, it seems
Time
like.
flies.
Yeah. But Mr. Chairman, I just want to say she gave a great presentation at the SHE meeting. I'm not asking any questions because Director Butler and I asked you about 1,000 questions at that one. Kat was really responsive, very balanced, very prepared. She didn't mind answering. I think you liked answering the questions, actually. But I won't torture everyone here today by asking those same questions. What I do want to kind of focus on is Director Skelton Roberts said, the 1%, right? Can you restate, and you might have said it at this time too, but sort of the outsized impact that we have? We're 1% of the overall transportation impact, I guess you'd say, but we're 10%. I remember it was a 1%, 10%
It gets to be a fun math problem, doesn't it? You
Yeah,
gotta
yeah, but
remember-
it's 10% of
10% of the region's trips. So that's drawing
Right.
from the American Community Survey of sort of the greater Boston area, the metropolitan statistical area, if we want to get nerdy. So when you look at the proportion that transit represents in serving and sort of how people get to work, it's the Journey to Work survey, we're about 10% of the trips. But then as you noted, the transportation sector currently is about 37-38% of emissions. We are 1% of that smaller portion of the statewide puzzle. If you then want to sort of get even crazier with the math, bus is only 18% of the 1% of the 37%. So we really, bus ends up being a rounding error.
Right, but the point is that we're not the solution to the entire problem. We're part of the solution, and we have an outsized impact by what we do in public transportation.
That's why we continuously want to emphasize that the service itself is a climate solution. That being said, we know that there's more to do. There's been tremendous improvements by shifting from diesel buses to hybrid buses, including as the technology improves and the emission standards get tighter, the air pollution impact from our buses has really decreased significantly over time. And so that's why we're excited to both continue to phase in BEBs as the market can deliver buses that can meet our service, meet our routes, but also continue to think about strategies that we can use around being able to run in battery mode for small distances and trying to look at how we can scale that technology.
And that's how we build out our infrastructure to support them as well. Yeah.
Correct, yeah, absolutely. The last piece I'll say is that renewable diesel, it's a different type of fuel. I think a lot of people heard about biodiesel, where that's just blending the fuel, but it's mostly just regular diesel with some biofuel integrated. Renewable diesel is very different. It is based on essentially vegetable oil.
Sulfur, so the sulfur, reduced sulfur?
It would still be ultra low sulfur, but it's
right.
Renewable diesel significantly decreases the emissions, and it also has lower emissions of some of the criterion air pollutant emissions. I know that folks who, obviously we know there's a localized impact to our service, and we know that that continues to matter to our folks, and so that's going to continue to be something that we work on for our riders to continue to improve the air quality performance of our bus fleet.
Great presentation. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
So
Thank you, Director.
I'll add,
Director
as someone
Skelton
who worked
Roberts.
in the transportation and emission sector for most of my career, I totally get that this is not only an emissions, it's a road shift strategy. If you're able to build a transportation system of the future, the goal is to get more people out of their cars and onto public transit so we could have that effect or that positive impact as well. So love the presentation, thank you.
Appreciate the kind words, thank you.
Thank you. Any other question? And I want to say, I got a full briefing. Kat was great, and this is going to be an ongoing discussion, and more information, or as the board members want to continue to get that information, there's definitely briefings that are available, but I think this is going to be an ongoing and important discussion that we'll have at the board with you and the agency. So,
Absolutely.
thank you
Looking
for the
forward to reporting back again.
Thank you for the presentation. Thank you. And finally, on the agenda, we are at the CIP presentation.